Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar with AMSYS and SiliconExpert, during which we address your immediate concerns about electronic component supply, brought to you by AMSYS and SiliconExpert. I'm George Corralius, and I, along with Chris Gulo, will be your moderators today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. You can participate in today's Q&A session by asking questions at any time during this webinar. Just type your question into the Q&A text box and then click the Submit button. At this time, we recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. At the end of the webinar, we will ask you to complete our feedback form. Your feedback will provide us with valuable information on how we can improve future events. You can also launch the survey at any time by clicking on the red survey button at the bottom of the console. If you are experiencing any technical problems, please type your issue into the Q&A text area, and we will be glad to offer one-on-one assistance. Today's session is a continuation of our webinar series with AMSYS, demonstrating the advantages of using AMSYS and SiliconExpert to mitigate your obsolescence risk. You can access previous webinars by going to the Knowledge Center page on the SiliconExpert website. The links are also available in the Resource tab of this webinar. So speaking today, we have once again Bjoern Bartels, Managing Director at AMSYS. Bjoern has worked in the field of consultancy by supporting his global customers with obsolescence management, core competencies, and tactics for many years. And we have Oliver Hoffman, EMEA Director at SiliconExpert. Oliver's passion is sharing knowledge and insights into solving problems by applying data-driven decision-making. Bjoern and Oliver have worked together for many years, bound by the desire to mitigate obsolescence risk for companies all over the world. So now let's get to the webinar. And we're going to start off with a couple of poll questions. These polls actually ran on our social media channels over the past few weeks and have given us a pulse on our community's concerns. This is your opportunity to add your voice if you haven't already. So we will move on to the first poll. So you can go ahead and make a choice on this multiple choice question. What are the major electronic component data-related external challenges you are currently facing? So these are the external challenges. Which one really affects you the most? We'll give you a few seconds to log your answer. Again, what are the major electronic component data-related external challenges you are currently facing? We've got a few people that have clicked through. If the rest of you want to click your answers, and then we'll move on to our second poll question. Give a couple more seconds. We'll also be talking about the show that Bjoern attended last week, and he also actually asked these questions of the audiences that he was speaking to at the show. All right, so looks like we got a few people, so let's look at the results right here. So supply chain disruptions took the lead. No surprises there. But we will be discussing this one and the next question after we do a quick intro to our companies. So let's move to the second poll question. So the second poll question, go ahead and answer your choice of the multiple choices here. So what are the major electronic component management related internal challenges you are currently facing. So what is it within your company that seems to give you the most challenge? Go ahead and add your response. Hopefully you see the question. I don't see any responses coming through.
It's probably a more difficult question this time.
Yeah. Internal is, you don't want to throw anybody into the fray, so to speak. We have a few responses. So again, what are the major electronic component management related internal challenges you are currently facing? So is it your customer's external communication? Is it internal communication in regards to return on investment? Is it the contractual requirements or a lack of automation? We'll give a few more seconds for you all to add your input. Again, what are the major electronic component management related internal challenges you are currently facing? External communications, internal communications, contractual requirements, or lack of automation. All right, so let's see what the results were on this question. Lack of automation takes the lead. So with that, we'll dive into this in more detail and in depth as soon as we do a quick few seconds introduction to the companies. For those of you that aren't familiar, I know some of you have attended previous webinars, but let's start off the introduction with the introductions of the company with Oliver. So he'll give a quick overview of SiliconExpert, and then he's going to hand it off to Bjoern to talk about AMSYS. Oliver, take it away.
Okay, thank you, George. So the quick and brief summary about SiliconExpert is that, yes, we are still that company that is collecting data, mostly data sheets of about 1 billion components from 15,000 different manufacturers' parts in various product lines. It's more than 400 software and electronics engineers who are gathering this data for about 22 years now, as SiliconExpert was founded in the year 2000. And these, a bit more of 8,000 man-years of data and experience is what we are trying to make easily accessible, either for those users of ours who are using the browser, just to read those files, and some customers of ours are also, besides the human-readable data, also getting machine-readable data through API or web service interfaces directly into their hosting systems, similar to how the SiliconExpert data finds its way into the AMSYS tools and solutions. To set the stage for today's webinar, as we want to talk about electronics components supply issues and the disruptions that we are currently suffering. I will not very much talk about obsolescence, but when it comes to supply chain, there is also data that can be gathered in the range of no longer just asking for the country of origin for components, but there are other types of sites that are of high interest, like the upstream supply chain that we want to know about. Where is which incident really causing us some trouble? Where might companies experience delay because of their peers or their suppliers, or let's say potentially their customers' capabilities downstream, even though it might be in between a specific factory site and us who just wish to buy through distribution. This data is being gathered by SiliconExpert very intensely since February 2020, so for more than 2 years. And there's a certain amount of coverage which has significantly grown. It's not yet at 100%, as you can see on the sample screen, but we try to capture accurate location data to describe where, on which geographies, a specific component actually is depending, so that you can sense or begin actively sensing for disruptions to happen. We do monitor also events, or we call them insights, and we will send triggers as if they are affecting, for example, component getting significantly and measurably less available, or if the price is going to increase, or if the lead time is going to increase. That's what we are trying to express with the numbers that you see right here on the left-hand side. For those of you who are already using SiliconExpert extensively and this does not look familiar to you, that's called the supply chain module. And this is just to say, we are not just talking about productive continuous models. It is not just obsolescence management. The new art of fixing supply chain issues still comes with the elements of the disciplines of obsolescence management, which Bjoern and me will be talking later on about. So that was the SiliconExpert summary towards supply chain. Bjoern, now over to you.
Thanks a lot, Oliver. Just a quick introduction to AMSYS, Applicable Management Systems. We're at the forefront providing our best-in-class consultation and services to diverse industries through all verticals of the supply chain, being it transportation, aerospace and defense, automotive, energy, oil and gas, the industrial sector, medical devices, and so on. As I just said, we started off as a pure process consultancy firm with our expertise in life cycle, obsolescence, change, and risk management. Till today, we are giving workshops and trainings. We even audit companies to figure out how to get better internally. We develop concepts and even can take them over for quite a while. Besides that, we are a business partner of the Component Obsolescence Group Germany and also an endorsed International Institute of Obsolescence Management trainer, where we can certify obsolescence managers on a global scale. Over the years, a couple of products evolved. One of them is the exchange portal, the obsolescence management portal that is widely used with railroad operators, where diverse operators of train sets all over Europe exchange information on obsolescence issues and find solutions together as a community. Over the years, as well, our major application, the AMSYS Lifecycle Management LCM client, evolve, where we sit on top of SiliconExpert data and automate processes internally at our customer base. Also, FeedTool is available at the URL pcngenerator.com when you want to get into exchanging information beyond pure electronic components on product change and discontinuance notices. Just a few more words on our major application. Our major application, where we learned over years and years of experience consulting companies, as just said, through all verticals of the supply chain. It is a massive framework that comes with a lot of functionality, but what we will always tailor to individual needs to map individual process flows, risk analyses, and combine internal and external data. Our lifecycle management client does consist out of two modules. One of them is the risk management module, where you can basically find everything that you need to be completely proactive in accordance to latest obsolescence management standards as the IEC 6242 or SD22 DMSMS guidebook. The other module is the obsolescence management module, what we more or less see as the pure reactive approach to acute obsolescence issues. It does include a case management, and it also gives you the ability to inform your customer in a standardized format. How we do all this? On the left-hand side, we do integrate standardized format as a smart PCN or VDMA 24903 standards with an input mask, where you can directly, but digitally, communicate with your suppliers and manufacturers. And of course, we take SiliconExpert data. Basically, you can see us as an add-on, where SiliconExpert provides best-in-breed data on current obsolescence statuses, forecasts, lead time, pricing, environmental compliance, and so on and so forth, even possible replacements. We take all these data through an automated API into our application, automate your individual tailored processes on top of it, and integrate additional data from your internal already existing ERP, PLM systems like current stock levels and demands. We even can manage multi-level bill of materials throughout our application to aggregate risk on each and every level that you might concern of, and then integrate your individual process into the application with all different departments involved, being it engineering, quality assurance, procurement, sales, or after sales. This just as a little overview on what we're doing as an add-on to SiliconExpert data. We see ourselves as the management application automation that you can possibly get out there as an add-on to SiliconExpert data. So let me hand over back to our moderator, George, and I hope that there's already a couple of questions coming in.
Thank you, Bjoern. Thank you, Oliver. Great synopsis on our companies. So, as a reminder, please plug in your questions to the Q&A area, and that's what we're here for. But while we're watching for that, we're going to go back to the poll results and just see how we can just chat a little bit about the two poll results for both external and internal challenges, and then I'd like you guys to just kind of talk about the show last week and what you saw there, what people were talking about, and how this ties into our discussion today as well.
George, maybe we can start with the poll results from the first question.
Sure, right here.
What I think is, before it comes to communication internally, externally, or even automating everything, every company out there has to have good data. And seeing the results of the question here, and I did ask a pretty similar question last week when I was honored to speak at the International Institute of Obsolescence Management International Conference and Exhibition that happened in Munich, with a lot of experts there. The results were kind of similar to our poll results that are coming up here now, that obviously, as we're all concerned with obsolescence issues, it is still a major concern for us. But as in the current market, supply chain disruptions are giving us a pretty hard headache, and they might be, at least from my angle, even harder to understand or even to forecast. What I think, when you have a lot of historical data, and as far as I'm concerned, SiliconExpert using the similar algorithm that I also worked on with the University of Maryland years and years back, you can forecast quite good when an item is most likely to become obsolete, like forecasting the end of life or end of production, however you want to call it, because it is based on technology evolving over time, over years and years, maybe even decades, depending on what technology you're looking at. And the data is quite accurate. But what we learned over the last, let's say 2 years or so since COVID is around, and now the Ukraine war also affecting our supply chains massively, that there is short-term events that is also giving us a pretty hard headache that get even, or what I think, that are even harder to forecast than typical obsolescence issues. What is your opinion on that, Oliver?
The difficulty of forecasting obsolescence with this years to end of life. Like every now and then we talk about the algorithm, and we are on purpose making the difference of, we are trying to monitor long-term trends. Like the overall recipe just means just monitor the market introduction date and then the end of life date of components in a given category, preferably over decades. And the more data you have, the more accurate you will be able to forecast. Specifically, the more data you have over time, like it's about the length of the timeline that increases the reliability of the predictions for the mid to long-term future. Such incidents as in like unavailability through franchise distribution is not really within that algorithm. It's really about obsolescence as such, and that's where I see the current problem. Long-term predictability is one thing. It goes about life cycle and real obsolescence. And nowadays, the overlap in between, is it an obsolescence, or can I solve the problem with obsolescence management tools, as in finding alternatives, checking life cycle, checking availability, checking multi-sources, and so on? That seduces us to believe that we are in an obsolescence crisis still. But the awareness that this is more about availability as such doesn't force us to really new tools. What I think the change is going to be is we have to look at other pieces of data. And therefore, like a little 2-minute summary of how I understood the markets before pandemic, and now when we are in this market of supply chain, let's say, disruptions. So pre-pandemic, when obsolescence was about to occur, that was usually when the demand for a component decreased so that it could no longer be sold, with the manufacturer making enough profit to maintain production, which is okay. And technology is getting obsolete if there is less demand. That is fine. And the variables that we have seen in the market that have displayed like an obsolescence might be coming is that availability was at a very high level, but was almost not changing. It was stagnant and just fast forward. And every now and then we saw mild movements of up and down on price, depending on demand. It was the function in the open market, how demand can influence the price as such. Now, in the pandemic time with the supply chain disruptions, we have to look at the third variable, because we used to see a bit of up and down when it comes to the lead times. But since February 2020, a behavior which we are seeing significantly for many components, for many technologies, for many categories, is that the auto-balancing function of the open market, that price is going to adjust the demand based on what is available, is no longer enough. The demand has not been slowed down by increasing prices, and instead has forced the manufacturers to confirm and to commit, we can no longer deliver with lead times of 10 or 20 weeks. Now it's getting 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and whatnot. And that new dimension, I'm not calling it the third dimension, but that lead time is now going to be our biggest problem, and that is what we call supply chain disruptions, can no longer be, let's say, solved by just looking at the variables that helped us with obsolescence management. We all need to learn anew to look at lead times as such, and until the algorithms can be adjusted to respect this behavior, to get back to Björn's question, we will have to sense and trust and learn from individual events as we are capable of monitoring them. And this monitoring, again, is monitoring different things, specifically decisions that are influencing the lead time, on how we expect lead time to change, and how the manufacturers are capable of improving the lead time in our favor. And that is challenging. Like there are categories when I do my own little observations in SiliconExpert, like with my little guinea pig categories. Some categories are already getting better. Some manufacturers are on average reporting a decreasing lead time. In some tunnels, there is light at the end of the tunnel, but not in too many of those. And from what I see here in supply chain disruptions being confirmed as the major concern, I suppose that not many of us are seeing this light at the end of the tunnel, not even in far distance. And that is how I see the market data-wise, even though I'm just finger-pointing way too much to like, let's pay more attention to lead time and the trend that lead times are providing. But the capability to monitoring this, to processing these with internal processes, that's something where I much more prefer of like hearing Björn's opinion on how do we handle this within the tools that we are given and the processes that we already have. That's more your domain, my friend.
I mean, usually it starts with a lot of companies that are using our application to really then finding best solutions to occurring problems. First argument is always like, hey, is long lead times really an obsolescence issue, yes or no? Because if I look at the IEC 62402 obsolescence management standard, obsolete is defined as an item is no longer in production by the manufacturer to original specification. So by standards definition, that might mean long lead times are not necessarily an obsolescence issue because that item is still in production. Individual companies just have to wait a little longer, 50 weeks plus. I might argue a little differently because we do have a proper case management systems that guides individuals through their internal processes to finding best solution because it is a problem, obviously. And the question is, can you wait 50 weeks plus for that item, yes or no? And most companies would say, no, we cannot wait. So I would call it kind of de facto obsolescence issue because in the end, it doesn't matter if you cannot get an item because of hard product discontinuation, changes out there, even environmental compliance, or long lead times, price changes, and stuff. Individual companies are having problems because the thing what production companies or maintenance companies are most concerned of is getting the right items in time, in the correct quantity and quality to a price that they desire or that they can still pay. So taking supply chain disruptions, I would consider it as well as obsolescence issues, although not pretty clear by the standards. And this is a pure reactive side. If I move on now to the proactive side, and I mean, SiliconExpert is providing all the likelihood data that you need with the forecast of obsolescence issues and stuff, even current changes in lead times and pricings and so on. Like 3 years, 4 years back, when companies really started combining all this likelihood data with their internal data, I might argue the same as I usually do when it comes to obsolescence issues. So you wouldn't worry about long lead times if you have enough stock on hand to keep your production lines humming. You might worry about pricing changes if you have already qualified alternative items that are still coming at a good price level. So what I want to say is, I think even for the proactive side, it gets even more important to take good data that is available out there from SiliconExpert and combining it with internal data to do a full-scale risk assessment. And companies, till today, are doing better who have identified their critical components and items in advance, and these companies who had stocked up when lead times currently changed. And so on, observing the market, plus also identifying critical items internally is, I think, the key to success in the end to cope with all types of issues that we lined out here in our multiple choice question. Hope you agree on that one.
To that I do. I have a little question on a snippet that you mentioned of like what is clear in the standards. Like with the 62402, I think if I remember correctly, components are as long as they are in production according to specification by the original manufacturer, that's in production. When these things when this statement is no longer true, when it's no longer in production by the original manufacturer according to original specification, things are obsolete. I struggle in saying that there are so many things obsolete at the moment because they don't seem to be produced. Someone is waiting, but it is not actively producing. I was wondering if there is like behind the scenes obsolescence, and with what how do you see that, Bjoern?
That's a good question. I had the discussion with one of our customers last week, actually, at the conference. That individual told me, hey, my supplier stopped production because he couldn't get the items anymore one level down the supply chain. So is this item obsolete now, yes or no? Because he knows he will start production eventually at a certain point in time, but he cannot do it right now. And as I just said, in the end, it comes down to availability. We just have to understand availability correct. It's not about technical availability in our system or availability in our warehouse. I think we can talk about obsolescence issues once we look at the market and look at availability there. Do I have issues out there in terms of availability? And that also then include lead times and price changes and stuff, because in the end, all companies will open a case and they will try to figure out, being it an obsolescence issue or a supply chain issue, where is this item built in? Who is responsible? Is there possible replacements out there in the market? Do I already have internally approved replacements in my component list? And what is the possible best solution? What do I need? What is my demand? And stuff. So first of all, there is this, how do you call it? I'm a German, so self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thingish, that items are obsolete right now because of supply chain issues and production lines are shut down and stuff, but it can be handled completely same thing as already proven practices in pure, really no longer in production and will never be produced again items.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. So the controversy might go on, and every one of the participants in this webinar who would like to continue this topic, it probably could go a little bit longer. Huh? But there's something else that I wanted to ask Bjoern about, since I do see SiliconExpert as the provider of data as a service. And then when it comes to all the capabilities of obsolescence management, I see Bjoern and AMSYS and their tools as process of a service to making really things like work out from end to end as a process. Therefore, let's say SiliconExpert sees in the 4 different types of risk about lifecycle, multi-sourcing, environmental compliance, and availability. For the foreseeable future, and that's not a question for you, Bjoern, what do you think about emphasizing the risk of availability? That it is not just one of the 4 where we usually look at life cycle risk being the predominant one, to which we subordinate the others. What do you think about over-prioritizing the availability risk according to how we have been doing this throughout the last 5 years?
I'm not sure if I got the question right. Can you rephrase that?
The 4 types of risk that we have about life cycle, about replaceability, about environment, and then there is availability. And availability has been seen a bit not as the dominant risk. We always, as we come from obsolescence management, we look at life cycle risk on obsolescence notices, and the other 3 have been kind of looked at secondary a lot. I wonder if we have to vote for changing the perspective of that availability risk should be the predominant one moving forward for as long as the pandemic is ongoing.
As long as we all understand availability in the same way, I would agree. Because I might question, hey, what does availability on the market mean? Does it mean by the manufacturer, by some authorized distributor, by some non-authorized distributor in my stock and so on? Because there might be decades in between all these different types of availability. If we all understand availability as being influenced by obsolescence, changes in terms of fit, form, function, material, whatsoever, compliance, RHS, REACH in the EU, in California, or wherever you are bringing your end product to the market, plus all these supply chain availabilities that have complete different influencing factors, but will result in similar problems in the end. Because no matter what the reason is, all these issues will result in either your production is interrupted, you cannot fulfill the goal of your company anymore because you cannot produce your own products anymore, or you have a lack of system supportability because you do not get the spare parts in time. So if we understand availability in the same way, influenced by a likelihood, maybe not the likelihood of an item becoming obsolete, but the likelihood that I will have a problem in production or maintainability, then I would agree.
So Bjoern, just going to this one question that has come in. So are both solved by the same processes, obsolescence and unavailability? Is that what you're saying?
I would say really similar processes. So most of the companies that I know, even we assisted them in the past, or even we automated their processes in our lifecycle management client, they do have proven processes, workflows for obsolescence issues. And there's typical process steps that I find. However, I haven't seen many companies who have proven processes for unavailability. So, and if we understand correct that unavailability was, whatever the reason is behind, will bring us into a situation where we will certainly run into a problem, why not use proven processes that we already have for obsolescence? Because process steps pure from the reactive side that we see at no matter what company is, what company there is out there, no matter what product they have, no matter if they are production or maintaining company, it's one of the following. First, a PCN, PDN might come in. This is usually the trigger to start your workflow. You can use the same like, hey, my lead times are skyrocketing to 50 weeks plus, so take this as a trigger, because you will ask yourself similar questions as is like, hey, is this relevant for me? How do I prioritize different times of notifications or lead time alerts, so to say, coming in? Then you ask your question, where's this item built in? Do I still need it? What quantity do I still need? Up to when do I need the item? Do I have possible replacement already qualified? What types of possible solutions are out there? Will it be in life of need buy or lifetime buy, however you want to call it? What is hard if lead times are 50 weeks plus? So maybe that solution is just not available anymore. But you will do similar steps. You will look for replacements. You will look at the gray market and so on to source the item. Maybe even as a maintenance company, you will look for cannibalization or getting needed items, some of out of systems that are standing still there at the moment anyhow. So to answer to that questions, it is certainly possible to run the same process steps to find the best solutions, no matter if it's a hard obsolescence issue or unavailability to whatever reason it was caused by.
Okay,
what is
so
your experience
can we just
on that one?
Can we touch on the internal challenges for a couple of minutes here? This was also interesting. I mean, suggestions, comments, and your opinions and that sort of thing on internal. Let's talk about that, and then we'll circle back on parts, cross-referencing, forecasting again, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I like the results because actually this is the reason why we're there in the market with our application is to automate internal processes and methodology. And let's get that straight. Most of the companies out there are using a tool that shouldn't be a tool anyhow. And this is why we started with the lifecycle management clients, because you need a lot of data to be combined, being it data from SiliconExpert. As I just said, what is the current obsolescence status? When is an item most likely to become obsolete? maybe even beyond electronic components. I get inputs from manufacturers out there directly if I go over, and special to type components that are usually not covered into SiliconExpert. I have to have a look at compliance, exceptions, sunset dates, latest supply chain information, what we just touched, maybe even personal, individual technical knowledge. And it's really hard to plug in different colleagues, actually, and at least in an automated way. Then combining it with internal data, multi-level bill of materials that usually come out of a PLM system. Quality of data is key there to really do the matching in the end, to figure out where's this item used in, what are my affected products by a certain notification. You need information from your ERP system, stock levels, demands, requirements, contractual issues that are usually built in there, requalification requirements even. Can you easily just exchange an item with another, or any other information system that might be available at your company to figure out what is mean time between failure? How often does this item fail out there in the field? How often do I have to replace it? What is the documentation? What is engineering specification? And all these information have to be brought together to then reactively give tasks to individuals to be solved on due date and time and so on, to do all the risk analysis. And suddenly someone from upper management is tapping on your shoulder and asking you the question, hey, as an obsolescence manager, what are you doing there all day? How many open cases do we have? How many are solved? What actually did we spend to find the best solution on obsolescence issues? And what is our cost avoidance? Plus maybe even to really bring it even further, then your customer comes around and wants to be notified in advance 3 or 6 months on a next higher assembly on your product level as well. What we find out there, you can build processes, but the tool that we find being used out there most to handle all these, although it's only two-dimensional, is Microsoft Excel. And this is why I really like the answer, that the lack of automation is the biggest hassle here, because this is what we feel as well. Microsoft Excel or any other spreadsheet cannot handle all these different types of information, or even, I know a lot of people who are trying to manage processes with Outlook reminders and so on. So there's help out there. Get in touch with us because it needs to be automized, especially if, for example, you don't have to automate it completely if your whole product only consists out of 50 items or so on. I'm good with Excel spreadsheets. But once 50 or 200 PCNs, PDNs drop in per month, your product gets even more complex. And software is involved suddenly in your product that needs to be managed as well. You should think beyond spreadsheets, calculation tools, and get in touch with us or your local SiliconExpert reps to try our application as an add-on to SiliconExpert data. So that would be my answer to that. So for all this 47% major challenges, there's a solution out there.
Yeah, Oliver, what do you have to say about it? Especially ROI. I mean, really, it's it comes down, yes, it's lack of automation, but then when somebody decides to do something, how do they justify the cost and the return on investment, that sort of thing?
I do have a few comments on those, actually. Like on the automation thing, I would say that automation is a beast, and that it is as painful as the pain grows with the amount of components that we have in this overall process for obsolescence and monitoring. Like there are customers of SiliconExpert who have like an overall master parts list of like 500 different components that they have bought actively throughout the last 3 years, and that's it. Like there, I would not over-exaggerate like automation and data integration and processes and whatnot. There, I believe the human being can consume the data in a human-readable format through the browser. But there are also companies who like have the same problem, but not for 500, but for 500,000 components. And these things are like difficult to imagine that a human being is just doing this because I can remember what I have to do next and who's the other one and with how many other departments I would be working. So there's a need for integration. And the awareness for that, there used to be a pre-pandemic timeline, and now there is like a new awareness of the benefits of integrating data for quick decision making. The original story, as like it was 5 years ago, would have been that in a year you begin your awareness of like data is important. That's how you are using a component database like SiliconExpert. And the second year you realize the data and coverage itself has significantly improved. It's not just for lifecycle; it is also for risk management or for improving my internal lists for alternatives, or for environmental compliance and other regulations that are being added. And then afterwards, then in year number 3, people began thinking about probably we should integrate this in 1 or 2 information systems of ours as well. What I see now, and specifically in 2022, is that the question for how do I integrate is much more present, not just for the integrations to the bigger ERP and PLM systems, but also for the solutions of AMSYS, as Bjoern has just explained. So the behavior in the market, I think, is changing, and it is going much more towards not just integration, but for the reason of process awareness, which I appreciate very much, because that's what we, at the end of the day, are trying to do with the partnership of AMSYS and SiliconExpert. It is not just data awareness and data utilization. It is consistency in their repeatability as a process. And it is a tool, like with AMSYS as process as a service and SiliconExpert as data as a service, that needs to be invested into. And an investment of any company has to be defended. We have to explain the ROI. And there are just 3 reasons that a company would invest into, or for which a company would invest into anything. And that is either this investment enables us to make more money than before. Second priority, this investment enables us to have less cost than before. And the third one is to mitigate the risk in between the first 2. I have had this discussion several times last week at the conference of the International Institute of Obsolescence Management. And this is not an academic study. This is really just Oliver and the participants just discussing the same topic. But what we discovered most of the time is that obsolescence management, data awareness towards return on invest really materializes in, if we do this right, we are going to have significantly less cost. Like, we don't have to wait until things get really expensive. We are not going to be the last ones to chase components that are basically unavailable, and we are going to buy, if we can buy, when component prices go through the roof. So when it comes to internally explaining the return on invest, the predominant reason that I discovered last week at the conference was a good data strategy pays off by exposing us to less risk, resulting in lower cost in case of the risks happen. So I hope I could now combine, like I could walk the path from lack of automation towards internal communications about ROI and so on.
I would like to add on this, actually, because we were in the same discussions last week, but I'm getting these questions also a lot from customers that's starting off as pure reactive obsolescence management. They ask me like, hey, how can I sell the movement from being pure reactive into the proactive approach? Because let's get that straight. You cannot get SiliconExpert data for free. You will not get process automation for free and so on. So it is an investment, as you just said. But how can you argument that? What is the ROI? I mean, we all have the same gut feeling, kind of, that firefighting is not a method, and being somehow more proactive will actually, in the end, will save us money. The question is, how much? And I think besides having good component data and so on, a lot of data is already missing at a lot of companies because you have to build up a business case to argument that. And knowing that investing in that proactive insurance to obsolescence, supply chain issues, having good data, having it in combination, and all the like, you have to argument it that it's worthwhile doing so. But for most of the companies, even the basis is missing to start off with the argumentation. So what I usually ask is like, hey, when all you companies out there, you're doing good reactive obsolescence management, because maybe you're not calling it that way, but you're doing it because otherwise your production lines have been already shut down. You wouldn't be able to maintain anymore and stuff. The question that I usually ask is like, okay, how much money do you spend right now, today, on pure reactive obsolescence management? And most of the individuals are looking at me like, we don't know. And let's get that straight. If you don't know what money you're wasting today, how would you possibly come up with a good business plan and investment strategy in moving away from being reactive to proactive? So one advice I would really like to give to the audience here is, no matter if you already have a good case management system or ticketing system or not, track the cost. What are you currently spending on finding qualified replacement items? What does life of need buy, storage, does cost you? And it's not the piece part pricing. It is the terms of storage, regular testing, and so on, everything that is involved there. What does a redesign cost you? How often have you used it, and so on, to really showcase upper management what you always have to show upper management, show me the money. Where's the money that you're currently wasting, being pure reactive, or currently spending? And how can you get better? Knowing our past projects in pure process consultancy, we have always been able to save at least 30% of all obsolescence costs by the movement from being pure reactive to proactive. Was investing into the right tool set and data and so on. The question is 30% of what? What are you spending today to finding, in a firefighting method, solutions to suddenly up-popping problems? Please start doing that. Track the cost, track the money, to then build up your business case for internal communication, to even being able to show a high value in return of the money invested into that proactive insurance.
Excellent. Very good. So just as maybe talking about one more thing before we adjourn for the day, I know we had a couple of questions about, better options for cross-referencing parts, forecasting parts going EOL, old parts. And then we had, the question about AMSYS-SiliconExpert managing product forecasts from customer, which is very volatile and uncertain, in order to monitor last time buy component stock. So why don't you guys give your comments on those questions, and we'll wrap it up for today.
I think it's going to be really important to hear Bjoern's answer on, let's say, how to monitor LTV components and how we can cascade this on like multiple layer structures as such, and what you can do with the AMSYS tool. I will be quick on the answering the other three topics of the questions that Anthony and Jonathan have asked, as it goes to like how wide and how deep goes the capability that SiliconExpert is being used for. And that is when it comes to identifying alternative components, there is this cross-type list that we have, which clearly indicates like as American school grades, as like an A is the best, F is the worst. A is translated as it's a form-fit function alternative. Like that's what you might be looking for as a one-to-one replacement or as a substitute. B's and C's are still pin-to-pin compatible, but with minor or major electronic parametric differences, while as with the grade of D, cross-type D, it is no longer pin-to-pin compatible, doing something similar, but definitely not being pin-to-pin compatible. And within this process recipe of ours, on the letters A, B, C, D, F, that is about technical similarity. Like all of these different crosses that we have, which, by the way, meanwhile is a network of more than 5 billion alternative relationships, in there you can filter. Sometimes when it's a single source technology, then no other manufacturers are going to have an alternative. When this is technologies that are a bit more mainstream or like in production by several manufacturers, you can then still filter for life cycle being active, component being on stock, and like without any environmental compliance issues and so on. These filter mechanisms are there, and they are applicable to not just what is known as semiconductor or electronic. There's also like the passive stuff, and there are going to be like industrial computers, sensors, fasteners, fluids, connectors, materials and chemicals, even measurement and test devices. So that is within the portfolio of the SiliconExpert database. It ranges pretty wide, and we try to go deep. But when SiliconExpert is proposing or identifying alternative components, this is towards technical similarity. The other things need to be applied as filters so that you can set your own priorities. And in case SiliconExpert is timing out, that's a topic that we have to ask customer support. Sorry, Anthony, for that second question of yours.
I want to add on Nick's question, actually. Nick, great you're here. Hope to see you again soon. You were asking how do we monitor last time buy component stocks with all this uncertainty involved. First of all, not talking about tools, but from a process perspective, doing a life of need buy, last time buy, however you want to call it, and try to stock items for 10 years plus, from a process perspective, that's always the worst solution and should always be your last pick. Because even if it comes to quantity, you will never pick the right quantity. You will either buy too much or too less. Plus, we talked a lot about forecasting and stuff to forecast when an item will become obsolete, supply chain issues, or forecasts of internal demands, and so on. Even forecasting how long an item can possibly be stuck because of technical concerns and so on. Differentiation and so on, and items are not getting better once you put them on stock. That's for sure. So you have to test them regularly and so on. How we do this, same as with SiliconExpert, doing the forecasts on lifecycle forecasts. When we monitor in our application, we need good data, good internal data. Hardest piece of data that we actually need to do the monitoring, and it's the hardest to get internally, is demand. What is your future demand of that specific item? As I just said, you can either buy too much or too less. And having this data coming into our application on a regular basis to do regular monitoring, stock levels, demand, and so on, to then, and we now have better graphs into our application that gives you, at least based on the current data, a forecast when you might possibly run out of stock is available in our application. We can even set on alerts on your internal systems. Most of ERP systems do that as well, to be honest. They set alert once you run under a certain level of stock within your company. No matter what system you will be using in the end, it comes to good data inputs. And what we figure, not only with one company, but with many, is every one of us requires good data from the outside world. But having good data from our internal system is as much of a hard challenge that needs to be overcome before we even start automating and talking about APIs and stuff. So this is something we need to have a look at. Now that we're nearly coming to an end, Nick, you have my number. We can discuss this in further detail later on. Thanks for asking the question,
Very
by the way.
George, before
Great.
finishing, I have a cliffhanger comment to make, since the topic of demand is how we trust ourselves to forecast what we need towards our customers, what we sell them. But we sometimes also want to know, like, how much demand is there in the market? How much is the manufacturer's components being sold, if and maybe even through which distributor? The question of transparency and the question of trust is something which I also like assessing, and I'm discussing with a couple of people in the background at the moment. And when translating trust into a systemic attribute in a process, in an environment that has trust about these assets, that's when nowadays we have to think about blockchains. So if there's someone in the target audience that would like to discuss how we could blockchain the electronics industry, even just as a train of thought, of pure inspiration, let me know. I do need more people to join the conspiracy of figuring out if and how this could work, even though it might be impossible to ever implement. But bringing more trust in supply chain awareness, I think that is a big thing, and we need tools like blockchain to maybe build that trust to establish this and to make it possible. It might be costly to join. It might never work. But I would like to make sure that we as an industry have thought this through consistently. And I'm also going to ask Bjoern about this. No worries.
I will volunteer to be part of that working group. How to calculate uncertainty. Let's focus on that. I'm excited.
Wow. Okay. That is definitely a cliffhanger. That's good. We'll probably end up talking about that on the next webinar. Fantastic. Wow. Well, once again, Bjoern and Oliver, thank you for great information and a fantastic discussion. Any questions that we didn't get to from people in the audience, we will get back to you after the webinar one-on-one this week and into next week. So be sure of that. And for more information related to today's webinar, so you can please visit any of the resource links available in the green folder icon at the bottom of the screen. Within the next 24 hours, you will receive a personalized follow-up email with details and a link to today's presentation on demand in case you want to watch it again because you can't get enough of Oliver and Bjoern. And thank you all for attending today's webinar with AMSYS and SiliconExpert, during which we addressed your immediate concerns about electronic component supply. This was brought to you by AMSYS and SiliconExpert. This webinar is copyright 2022 by SiliconExpert. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by SiliconExpert and AMSYS, and the speakers are solely responsible for their content and opinions. On behalf of our guests, AMSYS and SiliconExpert, I'm George Corralius with Chris Gulo. Thank you and for your time, and have a wonderful day.
Okay. Thank you, George.